Hello, everyone, and welcome to PMP Live. Thank you so much for joining us in this new format where we can continue to bring authors and their new books to the politics and prose community. Please bear with us as we work out all of the kinks and get more comfortable, as this is still a new format to us. At any time during the event, you can click on the green button below to purchase Celeste's book, and that will take you straight to our website. And we are offering free domestic shipping as well as curbside pickup. You are still able to ask the author a question today. So that's just below with the Ask the Question button. And then throughout there, you can also upvote on those questions for the ones you want to hear the most. Finally, we want to thank you so much for being here with us today. It's small businesses like Politics and Prose that especially need your support in times like these. And so without further ado, we are very pleased to welcome Celeste Headlee to PMP Live. Celebrating Do Nothing, how to break away from overworking, overdoing, and underliving. Celeste is an award-winning journalist, professional speaker, and best-selling author of We Need to Talk, How to Have Conversations That Matter. She is a co-host of the new weekly series Retro Report on PBS and season 3 of the Scene on Radio podcast Men, which you definitely need to check out. So please join me in welcoming to PMP Live, Celeste Headlee. Thank you, Celeste.
Hi, everyone. It's a little bit odd, just like PNP is. It's a little odd to do a book event where I can't see you. So I'm just going to keep talking until it's time for questions. But I'm really grateful to PNP and other bookstores right now that are allowing authors like me to continue their book tours despite the odd circumstances that we're living in. So I just wanted to start out with the most common question I'm getting right now, which is about doing nothing in the age of self-quarantine. I did not know COVID-19 was coming. It just happened to be both fortunate and unfortunate timing. But I think that the time that we're in right now is a reflection of the habits that we've developed over the past 200 to 300 years. So when I began this book, it wasn't an intention to write a book. I was actually working on something completely different at the time. But my life was such a mess at that point. I was so overscheduled and so exhausted and so unhappy and irritated. And that was coming at a time when I was more financially stable than I'd ever been in my history. So it didn't make sense to me. And so this whole thing began as a research project to help myself to figure out what was going on, why I was getting sick more than I ever had, why I was unhappy. And as I began to peel back the layers, it really was kind of like peeling an onion, because I thought I was going to find out that the villain of the piece was technology. I thought I was going to find that if I just threw my smartphone in the East River, that my problems would be over. But that turned out to not be the case. And I tried. I lived like a Luddite basically for over a month, and it did not solve the problem. So if it wasn't technology, then what really was at heart of what was causing all of the stress and the anxiety and the unhappiness? And that's when I started sort of peeling back the onion to figure out where this all began. And I landed at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And it's funny, when we learned about the Industrial Revolution in high school,
Looks like we have lost Celeste, and she's going to reconnect in 1 second. Second. Sorry about that. Give me 1 second while we...
Better? Okay. I'm going to move the camera here a little bit. Sorry.
All right, welcome back. Thank you so much. Sorry about the technical difficulties, but we have Celeste back, so we are going to let her take it away.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. It said I had timed out. So there you go. So anyhow, I don't remember exactly where I was, but when I started going back to the Industrial Revolution, I was saying that we aren't actually taught how much changed when the steam engine went online. I don't think I ever really appreciated before what a seismic shift that was in human work habits and life, frankly, because when you look back at the history, and I ended up having to read a lot of incredibly boring books about labor practices and hours, but when you look back at the history and you track it, in sort of broad strokes, human beings lived a certain way for like 300,000 years and change. And then all of a sudden, the steam engine came online, and almost all of that changed. As soon as, I'm going to turn that off so it's not glaring in your eyeballs. As soon as time became money, pretty much everything changed. It changed the way we talk. It changed our language. It changed the way certainly changed the way that we work. All the way up until that time, human beings had been a task-based society. In other words, our work was based around completing certain tasks. So if I had a wagon and my wagon wheel broke, then you go to somebody who makes wagon wheels, and you have them make you one, and then you pay them for that item, that wagon wheel. But when the factories came online, it wasn't the wheel itself that you were paying, that an employer was paying to have created. It was time. It was the amount of hours that they could spend on the factory floor continuing to make wheels. So in other words, if you're a wagon maker, and you need to create one wheel, your work is done when that wheel is created. But if you're in a factory that makes wagon wheels, your work is never done. And interestingly enough, there's records of employers manipulating the clocks that hung on the wall so that they could trick workers into staying longer than they were supposed to. So they were literally stealing time, which actually is stealing money, because as of the late 19th century, time became money for the first time ever. And it's hard to explain that. It took me 70,000 words or so to explain it. But going from there, as we moved forward, what ended up happening was every single generation took this concept of the fact that time is money, and therefore wasting time is a waste of money, and they leaned into it. So if you start in the late 19th century, by the time you get now to 2020, it has become toxic. It's gotten to the point where we either have to change these habits or we're in trouble. The life expectancy in the United States has gone down every year in a row for 3 years. And they asked the doctor who was the lead author on the most current report, what's causing people to die? And he said, despair. So we're at a point right now where our habits are doing us physical and mental harm. I'm not trying to get apocalyptic about it, but we really have to choose. We have to become aware of the habits that are not serving us, and we have to change them. I mean, it's really that simple. And part of the reason to dig back into the history, in my case, was to remind us that even though it feels like it's been a long time since the Industrial Revolution, it really, in the span of our history on the planet, it's a blink of an eye, meaning that we changed almost everything 250 years ago, and we can change it back. We can choose habits and work hours and lifestyles that are healthy and that serve us and make us happier than the ones that we have now. We have to stop this philosophy that believes that one is measured by one's work and productivity and how efficient you are. Because at this point, if you're not working hard, you're not a valuable human being. The kind of things that we say about people that work only their shift. I mean, think back to the times when someone has said something about someone who clocks out and they're done, right? That's someone who is not committed. And yet they're literally doing their entire job. One of the people that I quote in the book is Jared Yates Sexton, who is the head of the creative writing program at a university in Georgia. And he recalled a faculty meeting where they were talking about another professor in a derogatory way and saying, she goes on vacation all summer, meaning she's awful because she's not working during her entire break. So part of the reason this is so bad is that the human brain just doesn't work this way. It doesn't function well this way. In some cases, it doesn't function at all when we try to keep it going and put our noses to the grindstone. You can't put your brain to the grindstone. So what you find out when you examine the research and the historical record, frankly, on the most ideal environment in which a brain can function and be creative and innovative, is that most of us have maybe 4 or 5 hours of focus in us on any day. Now that varies widely. I'm talking about an average. For me, it ended up being somewhere just north of 4 hours. But that's all we've got. And after that, you find that when you're forcing your brain to continue focusing and remain task-based and remain active, you see the amount of errors go through the roof, the creativity goes way down. So when you're forcing yourself to keep working, you think you're getting ahead, you think you're becoming more productive, but that's not what's actually happening. And this isn't recent. This isn't a product of our current distraction culture. This actually, we know this going back to the 1900s. We know this going back to the days of Henry Ford, that in fact, the longest working people, the people who put in the most hours in all kinds of different industries, also end up being the least productive. So for example, they did a study of a huge group of scientists at the University of Illinois, following them around as they went to the lab and left, and all of their work habits. And they found that the least productive of all of them were those who put in more than 50 hours a week. The most productive were the scientists that put in somewhere between 12 and 20 hours a week. And this has held true if you examine the working life of many of the most productive people in history, people like Charles Dickens and Charles Darwin and Henri Poincaré, all these incredibly productive people who ended up putting like 3.5, maybe 4 hours of work in every single day. And then they got out of their offices and went and did something completely unconnected to work. They chatted with their neighbors. They chatted with their family. They had a bath. Some of them took very long baths every single day. They walked with their dog out in nature. They went to music concerts. And part of this was a slow realization for me. It's funny because one of the questions I get asked all the time is, what was your epiphany? And I didn't really have any big epiphany. For me, it was not less an explosion and more like pop rocks in your mouth of little tiny bursts going off all the time. So I'll tell you about a couple of the small explosive epiphanies that I had. And one of them was that I came home very, very, very tired. And I flopped down on the couch and I was just thinking to myself, I cannot possibly make dinner. I don't have it in me. And I'm a good cook. I love to cook, but I was like, I don't have it in me to get up and go into that kitchen and cook. And I glanced into the kitchen and I started noticing all the things that are in my kitchen that were not in my grandmother's kitchen. So I have a microwave and a dishwasher and an instant pot and a bunch of different stuff, a robot vacuum. And what I grabbed a notebook and I started walking around my house, adding up all of the time that I save over my grandmother. How much time do I have that she didn't have because it took her longer to do everyday things? And it turns out that I have somewhere around 20 to 30 extra hours a week. 20 to 30 extra hours a week. And yet she belonged to book clubs and they grew their own vegetables and she cooked cupcakes and cookies for the PTA almost every week. And she belonged to the Rotary and they had the Lions Club and they did bowling. And she belonged to all these different clubs. In addition, she would have neighborhood barbecues and invite friends over regularly. They had the kind of open door policy where when I was sitting at their house, friends would come by all the time without calling. That was standard practice for all four of my grandparents. So where did she get the time? And I ended up doing the first thing that I recommend that you do, which is to get an honest reckoning of where my time was going. So I spent a little over 3 weeks, again with a notebook, writing down where my time went. Every couple hours, I would I'd split it up into 30-minute segments in my little notebook. Every couple hours, I would sit down and write down what I did for the past 2 hours. And I was brutally honest about it. If I'd spent 90 minutes looking at boots on Zappos, I wrote that down. I highly recommend that you be that honest because this is to help you. No one else is going to see it. The more honest you are, the more helpful it's going to be. And I realized I was wasting a huge amount of time doing stuff I didn't really want to do. And by that, I mean, in the average workday, I have maybe a little over 5 hours to myself every day before I go to bed. And I was spending 2.5 of that just kind of goofing around on social media, reading tweets and paging through Instagram. And at the time, looking through Facebook. I've quit Facebook since then, but it was not what I wanted to do with my time. And I realized I wasn't as busy as I thought I was. I was just not being intentional, mindful about where my hours went. So that was sort of the beginning of a change of life for me, which is still evolving. I am not in any way, shape, or form telling you I'm the master or the guru. I'm a work in progress, much like everybody else is, because it's really hard. Our society is structured around this idea of constant productivity. Even if you're not answering work emails at home, you're supposed to sit down and say, oh, I want to make soup, so I better go on Pinterest and find the ultimate soup recipe, which has all these arcane ingredients, and then I probably need some special tool in which to make that soup. And you see how that goes. We feel guilty sitting on the couch and only watching a movie, right? Instead, you have to pick up your tablet or your cell phone and page through stuff while you're watching the movie. But the thing is, we think that this is relaxing to us. So you finally get a break from work, right? You have a 20-minute break and you're tired and you're frustrated and your brain is hot from all the meetings you've had or whatever it may be. And you think you're going to go relax in the break room by just like spending a few minutes on your phone. What you don't realize is that neurologically speaking, your brain doesn't distinguish between paging through Facebook and work. As far as your brain is concerned, you're still working. You never took a break. So if you're lying in bed, paging, looking at your cell phone for any reason whatsoever, your brain not only thinks you're working right up until the moment when you go to sleep, but it also thinks your bed is a place for working, which you probably already know is one way that you exacerbate or get insomnia. It disrupts your circadian rhythm. So the very things that we're doing in order to relax ourselves are stressing us out. And there's another further level to this, which is that we know that even the sight of your smartphone stresses out your brain. So having your smartphone visible has an impact on your brain that's so strong that it lowers your IQ and keeps your cortisol level up. And the same has been found to be true if you're the type of person that leaves your email client, whatever it may be, Gmail or whatever, or open on your computer at all times. Even if you're not looking at it, even if it's minimized into the tray, your brain is spending energy thinking about that inbox and preparing for a notification to come in. It doesn't distinguish between a notification about an email coming in or a text and a knock at your door. It's an alert as far as your brain is concerned. And so it expends energy at all times thinking about that email inbox, thinking about that phone. So again, they have found that someone who leaves their email inbox open in the background of their computer, their IQ drops by 10 to 12 points. That's how much energy it takes for your brain to think about it. We also know that if you are talking with someone, so for example, they ran a study in both the UK and the US, in which they had strangers come in and talk to another person for 10 minutes. And in half of those situations, they just placed a cell phone on the table. It belonged to neither person. Neither one of them, it didn't make any noise. Neither one of them touched it. And yet they found that the people who were having a conversation in the presence of that cell phone were 60 to 70% more likely to say the other person was unlikable, untrustworthy, and unempathetic. So by using our tech as our relaxation tool, we are in fact increasing our anxiety and increasing our stress and extending our work hours to cover all of our waking hours, basically. So even though, like I said, tech is not the problem, getting rid of your tech isn't gonna solve the problem. You have to find times during the day when you can walk away. You have to be able to take a walk out in nature without listening to a podcast, without your cell phone there, without it present, stressing your mind out. And this is the answer to the question that I give to people who say, I'm not in charge of my schedule. My boss is not going to let me not answer his emails. So what do I do? Well, you have 10 minutes. Pretty much everybody has 10 minutes. And you can take 10 minutes here and there and take a real break. Not a break in which you go, oh, I can finally put up that shelf in the kitchen, or I can finally shop for whatever it may be online, but an actual break that is not work. You need rest. This is especially true right now when most of us are self-quarantined, when many of us are sitting at home all the time. And unfortunately, we are literally bringing our work home with us because we're working from home. So there are a few important things that you need to do in order to maintain your mental health during this time, and that you don't end up just a bundle of anxiety and stress. And the first one is to create those real boundaries between your work and your home life. So choose an end time. It doesn't have to be 9 to 5, but choose a time when work stops, and then stop the work. But the other important thing is find some time when you can put your smartphone away. Turn off as many notifications as you can, put it in a drawer, and leave it alone. Because as long as it's out of sight, as long as you're not touching it and you can't see it, that's when your brain truly will begin to relax. And at this point, we all need to relax. We're not giving our brains or our bodies or our emotions any downtime. And here's the danger of that. And I've got like 4 minutes left before we go to questions. But here's the danger of this. You may be aware that we're in a period of chronic burnout, of hot record levels of burnout. Burnout is not that you are sick of your job and you've had a bad day or a bad week even. Burnout is chronic. It means this has been going on for a while. The burnout is partly caused by the fact that because we carry our smartphones everywhere, we are never away from work. But it's also caused by the fact that the lines between our homes and our work have blurred. So none of us actually have a refuge. We have not created any space for our brain and body to be not working. So what happens when you're burning out? Your amygdala takes over. It's the oldest evolutionary part of your brain. It is your fight or flight brain. It's your monkey brain. brain. It is absolutely what you want if you're being chased by a tiger. But that's pretty much all you ever want your amygdala to do, is help you out in the very short term for a few minutes while you are escaping danger. And then you need the amygdala to not be in charge anymore, because the amygdala is not particularly thoughtful or careful or empathetic. It is fight or flight, and that's pretty much it. It reacts to fear. But what's ended up now, since we're in these chronic states of burnout and stress and loneliness and isolation, is that the amygdala is in charge all the time. And it leads to bad decisions. It leads to bad decisions about what you eat. It leads to bad decisions about how you spend your time. It leads to bad decisions that can lead to a lot of arguments with your family members, partners, friends, and coworkers. Your amygdala needs to be able to step back so that your prefrontal cortex, right here, can take over. That's the I'm speaking in very broad terms about neuroscience, but this is the executive decision-making part of your brain. It's the part that catches mistakes. It's the part that thinks twice. That's the part that you want controlling your decisions. And while you're in burnout phase, it never happens. Your body thinks you're in crisis mode all the time. So this is all kind of a lot. I just wanted to be planned to give as broad an overview as possible of what I was writing about. So let me circle back right here as I end the talk portion of it to what happened with me, which you'll be able to read as you read the book. Not just read all the different things that I tried, because the book is a combination of the scientific research along with my own personal experience and interviews with some very, very smart people. And what happened with me is that I am 2 steps forward and 1 step back. I guarantee you I am healthier, much less stressed, and absolutely happier than I was 2 years ago. I have not solved the problem completely, and I make mistakes in my scheduling all the time. And I think that's going to be true for all of us. But my goal is that we can start a global conversation. And that's really what it's going to take. because it's so ingrained in everything that we do, in the advertising, in capitalism, in our work structures, in how the way that we raise our children. It's so ingrained in our value system that at this point, it's really going to take a very conscious reconsideration of our work lives and our home lives and what we actually want, not just for ourselves, but for future generations. And that's 30 minutes. So I'll stop talking and go to questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Celeste. That's like one way I can immediately relate to that is how like staring at my screen and reading is so stressful. But as soon as I pick up a book, I like sink into the couch, and it's just like this. It's, I don't know, a quick little relation for me.
Yeah, millennials prefer reading books. You probably know this already. You work at a bookstore. And I wonder if this is why, because it is in fact less stressful to the brain.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to remind everyone to please submit your questions, and then as you're doing so, read the questions that are already there, and you can click on the arrow to upvote the ones that you want to hear the most. And also there is that button right there to purchase Celeste's book, Do Nothing. So go ahead and do that. You can still hear the talk as we're going. So let's dig into this first question. This is asked by Territorial. It's, right now we're being told that the greatest contribution we can make is to do nothing and stay home. But how can we teach ourselves to actually do that while we are self-isolated and not just immediately turn this into a time of self-improvement?
That's really, really tough. And frankly, not everyone's going to succeed at that. And the reason I say that is because we kind of eliminated hobbies from our lives. If you go back even just a couple generations to my grandparents and their parents, they all had hobbies. They did stamp collecting and coin collecting and woodworking, and all of the men in my family had tools and a workbench and would fix stuff. Now, frankly, very few people have those kind of hobbies anymore. The house has become just an extension of the office. So what do you do when you're home? And I would absolutely suggest find a hobby.
Yeah.
Honestly, try planting a bonsai. People will still deliver to you. Pick up a Lionel train set. Look how sort of helpless we are to a certain extent. Like nurses have put out a call to try to get people to sew face masks, because even though obviously they're not ideal, they're still better than nothing. And we used fabric face masks relatively recently, and they can be sterilized over and over. Yet how many people still know how to sew and have a sewing machine? It's a tiny fraction of how many there were even 30, 40 years ago. So yeah, pick up a hobby that is not part of your side hustle, that you can't sell on Etsy, that has no reason except for pure enjoyment, and force yourself to do it.
Right. Just start doing it.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. The next one is from Tiffany. And she asked, how should people respond to those, as example, boss advisor, who can only comprehend greatness through blood, sweat, and tears, done over very long hours without breaks?
I would give them a copy of this book, because there's a bunch of evidence in there about why that's actually going to cost the company money and cost them in terms of productivity as well. I mean, look, you can't change other people's behavior. So there, in that particular case, if you can't change that part of your life, then you're going to have to look at other ways that you can change your own personal life, the things that you do have control over. And there's a bunch of them that are in the book. They're all evidence-based. None of it is based on my gut. But for example, one of the best things you can do for yourself is just do something generous to someone every day. I mean, like small. Like buying a cup of coffee for the person behind you in line, or tiny little things, sending a thank you card to somebody. Yeah, that's great for them. That's awesome. But frankly, I'm focused more on what it does for you. And there are really incredible physiological, neurological, and mental impacts, benefits that come from the helper's high. Just doing something nice for someone every day can have a massive effect on your well-being. So there's a bunch of different suggestions like that. But, you know, if that's the way your boss is, they're wrong. They're costing their company money. It means that the work that's being done is rife with errors, and they are not opening up the door to creativity. Right. So give them a copy of the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is available right there. Great. Thank you. And then the next question is one tip. Oh, there we go. Sorry. One tip I've given my team members is similar to your choose an end time. Just like when I was at work, I would turn off my PC, shut the lid on the laptop, and put it away from my home desk. I put it on the top shelf in my bookcase where I can't readily go to it. I might even graduate to putting it in my backpack and put it in the closet.
Yeah, out of sight.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a question there. Sorry, I'm itching my knee, but I wholeheartedly recommend everything that's in that question.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So then Archer asks, do you suggest forms of leisure that are not digital, i.e., example, not TV, video games, etc.?
Oh, absolutely. You're going to spend most of your day looking at screens. So find stuff to do that has nothing to do with the screen. And there is a ton to do. I mean, when I talk about how ingrained this has become into our lives, the ratio between home size and lot size has vastly changed. Our houses are taking up way more of the lots, meaning that we have tinier and tinier yards, meaning that we would rather be inside than outside. So we got to change this ratio. So I don't mean you have to go outside. It doesn't matter if you are differently abled or not. Just find something that has nothing to do with your tech. Don't get rid of your tech. Just find something to do that's not connected to it. I actually subscribe. There's a bunch of things that I do, but one of the things that I did for myself, I just bought a house last year and I bought a subscription to My Garden Box. And so every month they send me like a whole little kit to plant a new plant. And then they send a little sign so I can name the plants. I think you're supposed to put what kind of plant it is, but instead I give them all names. So it's awesome. I mean, I look forward to it every month. And you can find things like that for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. And then another one, someone else says, I saw that you took a long train ride in the preparation for this book, as we had discussed. How did that help with the writing of the book?
Yeah, Al and I were just talking about this. I did take a long train ride. For those who haven't read the book, I took a 13-day train ride where I left DC down to New Orleans, across to Los Angeles, up to Seattle, across to Chicago, across to Boston, and back home. And in each city stop that I mentioned, I had like a day and a half, 2 days to stop and just walk around. The way that it helped was, one of the reasons of taking a train ride, of course, is that it's slow travel. And because I was writing about the slow movement, which began in Italy with slow food, I wanted to force myself to slow down. The other beauty of the train is that it goes through some remote areas, which is gorgeous. Like you get to some places you can't reach in like Glacier National Park, and the views are just, I mean, indescribably beautiful. But also there's no Wi-Fi. So yeah, you can't sit there and be just connected to your screen all day. You got to find some other stuff to do, crosswords and novel reading. And they have the Amtrak trains have the observation cars where it's all glass.
Right.
So you can go sit in there and just watch the scenery go by.
Yeah.
And the beauty of it is that when you arrive, like when I got to LA, I really felt like I'd traveled.
Yeah.
It's not like a plane where you just walk off the plane and it's like any other city. When you take the train, you feel as though you've journeyed. And it's a completely different feeling, and a good one. It's a really good feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right. So here's another one. Do you have any tips for taking breaks and doing nothing if you're trying to achieve multiple goals? I get caught in the trap of feeling like I need to constantly be doing more. Yeah.
So you're actually bringing your productivity down by trying to multitask. So the thing is, there's a couple things I would say. Number one, make sure you're doing one thing at a time. Don't fall into that trap of having 90 tabs open on your computer. one at a time. So if you're taking notes and doing research, sometimes people will write. I used to write this way, where I'd be sitting there tabbing through things and picking up research and stuff and be writing at the same time. That is a terrible way to do it. So your brain needs to focus on one task at a time. Research is a different part of your brain than writing, which requires creativity. While you're doing the research, you're not accessing the most creative parts of your brain. So you need to separate out those tasks. That's number one. The other thing is that you can set a timer, because you got to get up and take a break every hour. And maybe your Fitbit reminds you that you haven't walked 250 steps, whatever it is, even if it's just a kitchen timer that you set for 45, 50 minutes. Get up and walk away. Don't take a break by checking your email or checking Twitter or whatever it may be. Get the heck out of Dodge and walk away. And then come back. And frankly, you're only going to have your best work is really, you're going to have to find out the real time for yourself by experimenting. And I explain how to do that in the book. But you're probably only going to have about 4 hours of creative time. And then you really need to walk away and let your brain rest.
Yeah. Thank you. To what extent is this an American phenomenon, and to what extent is it global?
So there are several countries that top the list for a lot of these indicators. It's no surprise that America is one of them. The other countries that really peak a productivity obsession are the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. So all the English-speaking countries, which makes you think that perhaps there was something in the culture that we've passed along. Now, it is still a global problem. The EU not that long ago said that one of the biggest problems it faces is burnout and stress-related disorders. So it is global, but the Americans have it worse than most other nations. Sadly, we're kind of going in the wrong direction in other countries. They're picking up American and British habits rather than leaning in. But I will say that there's been some really heartening examples of countries like Denmark, even Germany and Switzerland, really putting policies, public policy in place, which is what is required to force people to shut things down. There are companies that shut down their email system completely at closing time. So if a client emails you, they will get things back saying, our email system is shut down. See you tomorrow at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. or whatever it may be. They put these practices in place to force it. And it kind of needs that, because if it's all left up to us to just, do better, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Timothy asks, will you have this conversation recorded or other conversations, podcasts, etc., to keep this conversation going? He'd like his employees to hear this. And I'll say that once this is done, it's automatically rewatchable. So you could share this link with people and rewatch this. So absolutely. And I'm sure you have some other things to suggest as well.
Yeah, I did an interview on NPR that you can find. I've done some other interviews, or you can support a local bookstore, Politics and Prose, by buying a copy of the book from them for all your employees. And then it's a double whammy, not only helping out your employees, but you're helping out a local bookstore at a time when they really, really need the help.
Absolutely. Thank you. Were you inspired by Bertrand Russell's 1932 essay In Praise of Idleness? It touches on many similar themes.
In fact, that is the quote that starts the entire book, is Bertrand Russell. I wanted originally to call the book The Cult of Efficiency, which comes directly from that essay that he wrote. The publishers decided that wasn't a perfectly marketable title. I'm terrible at titles. So I believe them. But yeah, it would have been called The Cult of Efficiency. And that sort of long extended quote about how we aren't able to relax or enjoy our leisure time anymore is where the book begins.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. And David asks, what about the opposite? too little stress? Can that be an even bigger problem?
No. So one of the things I did not expect to have to research, but I did, is I ended up in some fairly deep evolutionary waters. I ended up interviewing evolutionary biologists and psychologists and paleontologists. And the purpose of that was to grapple with this idea that we have, that we live to work, that humans need work. And the harder the work, the better, in order to be healthy and in order to survive, that's part of our inherent needs. So I wanted to answer that question. Is work an inherent need? Now, just a reminder, if you don't remember your class in evolution, an inherent need means that if we don't get it, it has impacts on our health, right? Measurable impacts. So those are things like food and water and shelter. Obviously, those are inherent needs. The number one need that we all have after survival is taken care of is belongingness. Number one. Freud was wrong. It's not sex. It's actually belongingness. And there are major impacts on your health and your life expectancy if you do not feel that you belong to part of a community. But I couldn't find any evidence of work as an inherent need. And in fact, if I were to give you $500 million tomorrow, and you had to find, and you didn't work, and you just found other things to do with your time, you'd be fine. You would be fine. So work is not an inherent need.
Yeah. Thank you. Lisa, as my eyes age, I find that e-readers are sometimes easier on them than print books because I can adjust the font and light. Is there research on whether book reading differs from print books to e-readers regarding its effect on the brain?
This is really fascinating. There's not really a difference. Now, again, we're talking about specifically e-readers where you can't access the internet. This is the dividing line, because if you can access the internet and you use that e-reader for anything like email or anything else, then yes, that e-reader becomes associated to your brain with work. But other than that, no. There was a lot of talk about how reading a physical book is just the superior way to read. That's a personal preference. It is perfectly okay to pick up your whatever it may be. And there are e-readers that come directly from independent bookstores and help to support independent bookstores, by the way, that it's okay to read on your e-reader if that's, and make that font as big as you want, Lisa.
Yeah.
I like e-readers because a lot of times I'm reading for research and they allow me to highlight and take notes, and they keep track of them without me mucking up a physical book. And also I like trees. But again, I use an e-reader that where I can support local bookstores.
Yes. Brittany asks, I'm about to quit my PhD because it makes me so miserable. So you're sharing about how despair has impacted life expectancy means a lot. That said, as I look at starting my career over, I'm worried about our culture of you have to prove yourself, generally by overworking. Is success and trying to maintain healthy work boundaries possible in this climate, especially when starting from the bottom?
I don't know the answer to that statistically. I mean, I can't give you evidence or studies or labor statistics that give you a definitive answer.
Okay.
I can tell you anecdotally that I quit. I mean, I was a reporter and host for NPR and PRI for 20 years. And I walked away in 2018, resigned, and started my own business. Kind of on a hope and a prayer, basically, but it was built a lot on the fundamentals of these, that's in the book. And I'm doing fine. I could make more money, but there's no evidence that once I've taken care of my basic needs, I think the drawing line is like 70,000. Once you're basically stable, more money doesn't make you happier.
Right.
So it's not a good trade.
Yeah.
So I'm okay making what I make. My mortgage is paid. Well, not right now, but but I don't have the evidence to prove that that's true. Just my own life experience.
Right. Thank you. This one's a little long, so I'll get, let's see. How do you speak to your team about finding the 4 or 5 hours of high performance? Our employees have to record every 6 minutes, even those that are salaried employees. Failure to record how those 6 minutes are spent can cause you to be terminated. I frequently work 5 to 10 hours of overtime, and then I drive an hour home and care for my adult autistic son. I'm going to do a team presentation on time management, and I'm using your book as any ideas on what to present from your book?
Well, there's tons of evidence in there to prove that that particular practice is unhealthy and counterproductive and is going to be way more expensive in the end. And feel free to reach out to me personally, tell me what that company is, and I will offer to come in and do a workshop, because that's very unproductive, and it's just killing any creativity that may be there. You have to give the brain the right environment in which to work, and that is not it. That would be perfectly fine if what we had in our heads was a computer. But we don't. Human beings are not actually logical thinkers. We are emotional and social thinkers. Literally, that's how we think. And frankly, if you look at the animal world, and we are animals, you will find that we're not among the logical ones. Human beings are not logical. So to treat a worker as though they were a machine is a terrible idea. I would say a few things to take out of the book. I mean, other than just the evidence that that's costing money, but also there's a lot of evidence that it shortens your life. So for example, multitaskers, people who try to multitask, because I'm sure you guys all know that the human brain can't multitask. We just try to switch back and forth between tasks as quickly as possible, and we're terrible at it. There are some species that can truly multitask. A pigeon is one of them, but humans cannot. So when you attempt to multitask, not only does the quality of both tasks go down by double digits, your IQ again drops by 10 to 12 points, but over time it does cognitive damage. It inhibits your ability to focus on anything at all and retain anything in your memory. And at this point, we don't know if that damage is reversible. So it's a triple whammy, right? That you're doing crappy work, you're dumber, and over time it's hurting your cognition and could actually impact your memory. So it's a terrible strategy. I know it feels productive. It feels to us productive, but it's a delusion caused by the fact that attempting to multitask shoots dopamine into your brain and makes you feel like a superhero for a few seconds. But it's a delusion.
Yeah. I'm going to do two more. With all of the shutdowns and out of the home activities due to the coronavirus, some people find that most of their activities have ceased. If income is not a particular concern, as with some of us retirees, how would you suggest we begin to use the free time in ways that are fulfilling and satisfying?
So the first thing I would say is find a way to help someone else, because that's going to give you a major emotional lift. And we found that helper's high that you get, the shot of serotonin and oxytocin that you get from doing something nice for someone, is long lasting. So it can really prevent you from feeling the effects of depression. I'm not a doctor. I'm not in any way, shape, or form making comments about anybody's medical routine or anything that interferes with doctor's advice. Just telling you that it can have a very positive effect on your emotional health. So write cards to people, send cards to people, offer to help someone with their studying. There's a ton of students who are at home. So for example, I read a newspaper article, I think it was in the New York Times, about some students who are like first generation college students, and they can't do the online school because all the libraries are shut down and they don't have enough money to own a computer. So I bought a laptop for one of the students. Now you can also reach out to some of these groups that are trying to help these kids and offer to tutor. You can set up a neighborhood sing-along. There's all kinds of stuff that you can do. Go out and weed the sidewalk. Pick up, garbage if you're mobile. But any of these things that combine not just an activity, but something that to your mind makes the world a better place is going to have a double whammy.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much, Celeste. So this last one, it comes from Politics and Prose. And during these perilous times, what books are you turning to, or would you suggest to help you get through these circumstances?
So I really like, there's a couple things I really like. Number one is murder mysteries, because I've been a journalist for a long time. And when you're a journalist, you work on stories that nobody ever gets punished and you never have the answers. So you read a mystery and all the questions are answered and the bad guy or girl gets it at the end. So I highly recommend those. I've actually been going back to some of the originals, Dorothy Sayers and Ruth Rule and some of the sort of classics. But there's some I really like the books that you can kind of dig into. And one of the ones that I picked up not long ago, a couple ones that I'll recommend one is called The Paris Library. Which is just a fantastic book. And I think the tagline is something like, sometimes you find heroes in the quietest of places. It's based on the truth of the librarians at the American Library in Paris, who resisted the Nazis by sending out books to soldiers and protecting some of the old books that Nazis had been going through libraries and just burning them down. The other one is called Pachinko, which is one of those stories that's so beautifully written. And it's just, you can just kind of dig into it. You can get into their comfiest chair and just like really live in those characters' worlds. Awesome.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you again so much, Celeste, for joining us here on PMP Live. And so along with the books that she suggested, you can purchase her book right here, Do Nothing, through this link, and that will take you straight to our website.
So I'll sign it.
And she can sign it. She can, we're going to have her sign some book plates and she's going to send those to us and then we'll mail those to you. So please do that in your notes. You can ask for a book plate, a signed book plate, and then we'll make sure we send that to you. So it's your support that is keeping us going at times like this. And we just appreciate all of you out there. We appreciate Celeste and authors like joining us during this and keeping these events going. We have a whole slate coming up. Tomorrow at 7 o'clock is David Daly with Unrigged. And then on Thursday is Best Call with Nobody Will Tell You This But Me. And then we have events in between as well and more coming up. So please, at the top of the screen, you'll see the Politics and Prose icon. You can click that follow button and see our whole list of events. Appreciate you, Celeste, so much.
Support local bookstores.
Yes, absolutely. And appreciate everyone out there. Thank you for tuning in and stay well read.
Bye.
Goodbye.